Is the new album from Albert Hammond Jr., Melodies on Hiatus, worth a listen? Let's find out. Hey everybody, it's Nick here with you. Welcome back to the Rock Squad channel, and welcome to my rock album review for the brand new album from Albert Hammond Jr. It's called Melodies on Hiatus. Before we get to it, guys, if you love to rock out as much as we do here on the Rock Squad channel, make sure to smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos. Make sure to like this video. We'd appreciate that. And make sure to share this video online with your friends and fellow rock fans. Melodies on Hiatus is the 5th solo studio album from Albert Hammond Jr. It's the follow-up to 2018's Francis Trouble. We got the first 9 tracks. This album was released in 2 halves. We got the first 9 tracks back in May, and then the back half of the album was released just yesterday. You know what? I'm actually a pretty big Strokes fan. I've been a Strokes fan for a very long time, over 20 years now. I followed them throughout their career. I've seen them live a couple of times, and actually I'm a fan of Albert Hammond Jr.'s solo stuff as well. I'm a big fan of that first record that he released all the way back in 2007, his first solo record called Yours to Keep. I think that's a great record. It's one of the better solo records and side projects from the members of the Strokes, but I have to say that I haven't listened to a lot of Albert Hammond Jr. solo stuff since then. He's released a lot of material. Obviously, this is his 5th studio album, so he's released 4 studio albums and a bunch of EPs as well over the last couple of years. So I haven't listened to a ton of Albert Hammond Jr.'s solo material, but I think he's a very talented songwriter. I think he's great in the Strokes, and I'm happy to say that this new album from Albert Hammond Jr. is pretty good. Yeah, I'm happy to say that with this album, despite the title, the melodies are not on hiatus. There are plenty of great melodies and plenty of things to enjoy about this new album from Albert Hammond Jr. The only thing I would say is that it's extremely long. We're running at like 19, 20 tracks on this thing, so it's a very long album, a very long listen. The good thing is that a lot of the songs are fairly short. They're only running like 3 or 4 minutes long, so it's not like you're into the track too much if you're not digging the whole thing. It is a little bit of a long listen. I would say there is quite a bit of filler on this as well, even though there are some great tracks, but that's to be expected. When you put this many songs on an album, there's bound to be a couple of tracks that you don't really dig. But considering there are so many tracks on this album, and I don't want this review to be an hour long, I'm going to do a rapid fire review of all the tracks for Melodies on Hiatus. Are you ready? Here we go. The first track on Melodies on Hiatus is 199. I love the electronic influence on this album. It features a guesting spot from Goldlink, who's a good guest on this song. Not super familiar with their music outside of this track, but they did a good guest spot on this. Has some cool synths, a cool opener, but you know, maybe not my fave song on the album, but still a good way to kick things off. And also featuring some auto-tune vocals. Albert Hammond Jr. going full Kanye on the auto-tune on this track. Downtown Fred is a cool title, features shimmering guitars. It's about relationships, I think. It's got a great melody and great guitars. Old Man is a great single, and it's a great song on this record. It's got a catchy melody with kind of that Strokes kind of sound to it, which a lot of the songs on this record do have that Strokesy kind of sound to them. It's got a great solo on it. It's kind of Nick Valenci, Albert Hammond Jr. style, so it sounds like a Strokes solo. I'm not sure if he's writing the song about Albert Hammond Sr., who is a songwriter in his own right and has released many hits over the years, but you know what? This one's really cool. It's an ass shaker, and I love the backup vocals on this. Old Man, probably my favorite track on the album. Darlin, also one of the best songs on the album as far as I'm concerned. Could be a Strokes song. A lot of these songs I could see Julian Casablancas singing them instead of Albert Hammond Jr. I'm not sure if some of these songs were meant for the Strokes or if they were completely written for his solo career, but it's great. It's got a catchy melody and some great backup vocals. Thoughtful Distress features Matt Helders of Arctic Monkeys and Steve Stevens, who's Billy Idol's guitar player of all people, but this one's got a great opening guitar part on it. It's got some sweet, really cool grooves on it. It's got a great chorus and a great solo from Steve Stevens, so he did a great job on this track. Libertude, I was kind of getting a little bit of a Peter Gabriel Sledgehammer vibe from this. There's a lot of songs on this album that kind of remind me of other songs, so it's getting a little bit of a Sledgehammer vibe to it. It's got some shimmery Strokes-like guitar on it, so you know, Albert Hammond Jr. really digging in on the guitar tones and the guitar stuff on this, and it's got a sweet, nice melody to it, which I thought was really nice. And it was a love song. He's singing about people making him happy. His girl or whoever he has in his life is making him happy. So I really liked Libertude. Memo of Hate is a super punky song. It's, the title makes sense if you're calling a song called Memo of Hate. I love Albert's voice on this song. It's got a kind of country jangle kind of guitar to it, which I really loved. And opposite of Libertude, this one is kind of like an anti-love song. So he's digging into a little bit of that punk rock, guided by voices kind of vibe on this album. Home Again, this is kind of weird. This song reminded me of Jesus Is My Friend. Do you remember that song? Jesus is my friend. I have a friend in Jesus. Jesus is my friend. Yeah, that's what this song totally reminded me of. It had some cheesy synth on it. It was pleasant, but it was cheesy, so this wasn't exactly my favorite song on the record. I Got You, which closed out the first half of this album, which was released back in May. It's got some great guitars on it, and again, I can hear Julian Casablancas. The way that Albert Hammond Jr. is singing on this album, I could hear Julian Casablancas and his croon on some of these songs, but it was another really sweet song, so I enjoyed I Got You. Then we get to the song called Caught by Night. Again, another Strokesy kind of song. That's a continuing vibe throughout this album. I love the dark kind of vibe that he did on this song. And it didn't jump out to me as much as I wanted to, so I would say that Caught by Night is actually one of the filler tracks for me on Melodies on Hiatus. Dead Air, another Strokesy kind of tune. Kind of dug it, but kind of didn't really do much for me. One Chance is another Strokesy kind of song that reminded me of something that Julian Casablancas could have sung on this album. Maybe he could have done a guest spot, but he's got his own solo stuff going on. Had some spiky guitars on it, a great chorus, and a great solo. The song Remember had a cool vocal from Rainsford, I think is her name, but otherwise this was a pointless track. It wasn't even 30 seconds long. Forget it. 818, like a lot of the songs on this album, even though it was a little bit of a filler track for me, had a great riff, had some great vocals on it, and had a great chorus. As we get into Fast Kitten, I have to admit that I was losing a little bit of interest in Melodies on Hiatus. Like I said at the top, this is a very long album, and some of these songs just didn't really jump out to me. The more you get later on into an album like this, it feels like things start to sound a little bit samey, but it was still okay. It had a kind of a cool bendy kind of riff in it. The guitars are cool. The guitars are great in general on this album, but Fast Kitten just kind of went in and went out for me. I'd Never Leave is one of the more low-key tracks on Melodies on Hiatus. It had some great background guitars on it. It was probably one of my favorites from the second half of the album. It was nice for him to switch things up. There's not a lot of songs that take a dip into kind of the dynamics and go into a little bit of that the kind of more quiet kind of vibe, but I really liked I'd Never Leave. Getting into the last three tracks on this album, we got to keep going. Never Stop was, it sounded like an 80s song, kind of like some of these other songs on this record. It reminded me of a song that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I was thinking, like, is it AC/DC? You Shook Me All Night Long? Something about the song reminded me of another song, specifically from the 80s. I don't know what it is, and it's going to bug me all day now. False Alarm was another kind of filler track for me. It had a decent riff on it, but I can't say I remember it. And then we cap off the album. After those filler tracks towards the end of the album, they finished the album with one of the strongest and best songs on Melodies on Hiatus, featuring Rainsford on vocals, called All Right Tomorrow. I really liked this song. I dug the harms. It had a great vibe to it. It was kind of jazzy, reminded me of a Canadian singer-songwriter. I'm sure not a lot of people are familiar with her. Her name is Sarah Slean. It reminded me of a Sarah Slean song, so that was definitely something that I really enjoyed. It was a great finisher from this album, and after those kind of filler tracks towards the end, it was great to have such a strong closer to this album, and it was definitely one of my favorite tracks on the record, so I really liked All Right Tomorrow. So all in all, I thought that Melodies on Hiatus was a pretty strong record. It's a lot to get through. It's 19 songs. It's not too long, and like I said, a lot of the songs are 3 or 4 minutes long, so it's not like it feels like a total slog, but it was a very long listen when you have 18, 19, 20 songs on a record. And songs are all quick and snappy, which is good, so it keeps moving. It doesn't get too boring, but I did feel like there was quite a little bit of filler on side 2. Side 2 to me wasn't as strong as side 1, and it sounded a lot like a Strokes album. I know that's kind of an obvious thing to say, but a lot of the melodies and the vocals and the guitar stuff on here reminded me of the Strokes, which is to be expected because Albert Hammond Jr. is 1/5 of the Strokes, so that influence is obviously going to shine through in his solo stuff as well. But for me, somebody who hasn't listened to a lot of Albert Hammond Jr. since that debut album back in 2007, it was maybe a little bit too much Albert Hammond Jr., but I still thought it was a super enjoyable listen, and I really think he's a great artist, and I think this was a great solo effort. For me, I'm going to put Melodies on Hiatus on a solid 3 out of 5. All right, guys, that is it for me and my review of the new album from Albert Hammond Jr. We did a little rapid fire there, which is a good way to do the review. Let me know what you thought of Melodies on Hiatus in the comments below. Make sure to like this video. I'd appreciate that. And make sure to subscribe to us here on the Rock Squad channel. If you love to talk about rock music and rock reviews and news and all sorts of fun stuff, subscribe to us here on the channel, and follow us on social media and Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Rock Squad Pod. And check out my band as well. If you love bands like Oasis, Foo Fighters, Weezer, that kind of stuff, you'll love us as well. We're called Fools Union. You can check us out at foolsunion.com. But I'll see you guys for another rock album review next week. Until then, everybody, rock on.